Welcome to Wonderstruck, and our guest today is Russell Brand. He is a podcast host, a comedian, actor, philanthropist, community builder, meditation teacher, husband, dad, and pet owner of, 20 cats you just told me?
Yes, I think it's 20 now.
It's amazing. I love it. There's some very cute ones that I have just seen. So thank you for having us here at your beautiful studio. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you again. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I wouldn't like to be individually scored on each of those categories that you listed. As a meditation teacher, as a father, I think I would aggregate around mediocre. But I'm certainly happy to have so many qualities tagged in an intro.
Well, you're very welcome. And as far as those categories goes, I think we have to just be good enough.
Yeah, that's right. It seems so.
So I have some questions that I wrote and rewrote to ask you. And one of the questions that I have for you is that actually one of the first times that I met you, it was on one of your Zoom phone calls. And it was back in 2020, and we didn't really meet, but you had called out my name, and I was so nervous that I couldn't answer. I was just like staring like that. And then, we started this whole Wonderstruck engagement and, doing some work with Harvard Divinity School and 5 books, and you came to our embodiment symposium this summer. And, again, it was so wonderful to meet you. You have like a very calming presence. And so it was easier to talk to you. But I was nervous and anxious. And I was curious, as someone like yourself who's a performer and an actor, like, how is it for you? Do you ever have that kind of anxiety when you're about to do something, whether it's a performance or a show or even going to a dinner party? How do you handle anxiety?
I have near constant anxiety is how I would describe it. Sort of even now, and not in particular related to what we're doing, but like I can always generally locate some feeling of, I guess for simplicity's sake, let's call it anxiety in my body. But one of the things that I'm trying to do, Liz, is not call it anxiety, but just to recognize it as a feeling and to try to examine why it is that I have a preference. This is because of a meditation I was recently sent by that guy he's called something like Suki Rinpoche, something like that, and where he talked about beautiful monsters, like your anxiety and your shame and fear, beautiful monsters.
Lovely.
So because like a lot of people in recovery, I do feel those things pretty regular. I'm just trying to experience them. Ambient anxiety. Now, when it comes to sort of anxiety that is in relation to an event, I suppose I have become over time more adept at seeing that is a preparatory tool, that potentially this feeling can be metabolized into action, and that is how I use it. So if I'm anxious or nervous about an event, if it's performance, I can deal with it. Tell the truth, at dinner party, because one of the things, when we did that thing where I came to Italy for your conference, I think I told you at the time, and I told Camilla and the people that you work with, I said, can I just do the bit where I'm talking? Because I'm much more at ease with the dynamic of oration or at least public speaking.
Interesting.
Than ordinary communication. I don't feel particularly comfortable in those circumstances. My mate James, he says we're not nighttime people anymore. He's in recovery like me. We're daytime people now. I attend a lot of 12-step stuff, that's sort of where I live spiritually and perhaps emotionally, you might say. And in those environments, one of the things I know I enjoy is that the structure that a 12-step environment often has a stated explicit beginning, a main share is customary to refer to it as, and timed shares back. I feel quite comfortable with that. As a person who deals a lot with chaos and has at points had rather a chaotic life, I enjoy structure, even though I know chaos is a big part of who I am and is part of the access I have to efficacy comes via chaos. And perhaps this sense of abiding anxiety is a component of that. So in a sense, my attitude towards anxiety is sometimes I bring my presence to it and my awareness to it and I accept it. Other times I recognize that there is some utility in it, and sometimes I frankly fall victim to it.
Mm-hmm. That's a very thoughtful, wise answer. I love that you said that some of your efficacy comes through the chaos, and yet as long as there's like a frame or some kind of structure around it, it helps bring your creativity, I suppose, into being.
Yes.
And I love how you said that. And as for things like the beautiful monsters that you mentioned, it makes me think of Tara Brach, who has this idea of like bringing them to tea. So I can't tell you how many tea parties I've had with fear, more than I would like to count. But it is a way of like, okay, let's like kind of take some of the edge out of this so that it's somehow manageable.
I feel that perhaps Rumi and his guest house analogy is the best iteration of this idea, that we allow them to visit us and we don't try to usher them out the door. I suppose as an addict and perhaps as a human, Epicureanism remains pretty strong in me, and I recognize now that I have this relationship with ecstasy and abandon. And ecstasy is a religious word. Ecstatic states, I suppose, imply a blending, blurring, perhaps even dissolution of boundary and a return to some kind of unitary undergirding that many spiritual people believe is the source of all reality, that the persona in its temporal nature can only facilitate a certain amount of happiness. But when we live in a culture that continually augments the boundaries of self, celebrates individualism, materialism and progressivism, and tells us that only the things that can be calculated and measured are valuable, even though our subjective experience continually is at odds with that idea, it's difficult not to think of myself as Russell and Russell's wants and Russell's fears as the priority. But I do, on occasion, and in particular in, say, ecstasy, which I've experienced much less often than I'd like, because if it was up to me, I would not come down from ecstasy. I'd stay there. I'd get that ecstasy and I'd live in it, But I live a different life now. And I suppose I have to take a more meandering path to bliss, although I'm always drawn to the shamans, sages, rishis and saints that speak of bliss as sanctioned and even sacramental, rather than the more prudish and ascetic, moral, philosophical and political commentators that believe in a kind of stringency in being. I don't like to live cold, but sometimes I do have to live quite serenely.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear what you're saying, and what you mentioned about the shaman aspect and living life in this way with the ecstatic and the connection to something that's a more interconnected web and way of with everything, with each other, with nature and ourselves, other people in the world, rather than this kind of very staunch individualistic way. It makes me think of, well, of course, spirituality and how you kind of got your way into that experience. You've said that you came to spirituality through being forced, right? Like coming from the place of addiction into a recovery. And yet you still chose to take that path, right? Which was obviously not an easy one. You had no choice, right? The death was the other option, right?
Yeah. It says in the literature of the program that I belong to live a life on a spiritual basis or face an alcoholic death is not an easy decision to make. And I like that it says that you would have to think about it. What will I do? Live a life on a spiritual basis, or will I go with this drug-induced or alcohol-induced death. It's not, well, obviously I don't want to die, so I have to do this. But I, like many people, wrestle with that choice, and that choice comes again because I think continually through passion we are invited back into the material. Through carnality we are invited back into attachment. And it seems when we are contextualized by sanctioned selfishness, pretty easy to live selfishly and find ways of underwriting that selfishness. It's not hard. It's very difficult. I was thinking today, in fact, that's what they must be, the saints. They must never leave the place of service. They must be able to spot when they are at the turning point. They must notice, I'm just about to turn into my selfish, I'm going to go selfish again, back into the ego. No, think about someone else. Think about, are you being of service in this moment? Are you loving God? Are you being of service to the person around you? And at least for me, when I say is it a choice, of course it's a choice in that I now know, I'm aware that I could now go and get drugs, or I could pursue sort of illicit behaviours or whatever. And I suppose the program works. The program I use works. It's a pretty amazing piece of folk technology. The acceptance that it won't work again, the belief that it's possible to change, the willingness to hand over your life to a secondary force, an ulterior force, a bigger force perhaps. And even if that's a philosophy rather than a supreme being, even though I'm down the supreme being path myself. Yeah. It works, this stuff, but it isn't an easy choice, and I haven't entirely made it, but then I can't entirely make it now because I only live here now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think of that as like, that first step about life becomes unmanageable and I choose to surrender to something greater than myself that is the path of spirituality. That is the path of of a mystic. It's a path of, giving over. It's like recognizing that it's not just about me. There is something greater, and there's a profound sense of power in surrender. It might seem paradoxical, but it's really engaging and moving. And, I was thinking about that. You had spoken, it was a beautiful interview that you did with Rick Rubin. I loved it.
Yeah, I love him.
It was really powerful. It gave me goosebumps throughout intermittently. And, you brought up this book by Rogan Taylor, the show, the Death and Resurrection show.
Oh, yeah, you know that book.
Well, only because of you. So thank you. But I looked into it, and this idea of being an artist is like kind of a shaman and holding all of this profound energy and creativity, maybe like your chaos that you spoke about a little bit. And then what do you do with it? And if you can't handle, if it's overpowering, it's like the descent, the shaman, like the almost by definition, the shaman goes into the descent into hell or burns up and reemerges, right? In a way that they become the truth teller, the prophet in that way. And, and I think about that also within the 12-step program, like going in, coming from, you're in hell, and then coming back out and seeing the world, being more open to the world from this spiritual perspective. So I think about you in that context.
That's real kind. You're a very devoted and lovely person. You're very kind and open and committed. It's really nice to be around you. I noticed that I'm in a different type of mood than I was 5 minutes ago.
Oh, that's great to hear. Really, glad to hear that.
Yeah, you're easy to be around. Thanks. I am tense person, I don't know, sort of T.S. Eliot. I should have been some ragged claws on a seabed floor or whatever it is. T.S. Eliot, mangled T.S. Eliot here. But I sometimes feel like monastery for me, like that I should be contained. I don't do well in civilization, not because I'm above it, but because I am beneath it. Not because I'm not tempted, but because I am tempted. Because stimulation to me is irresistible. I'm sometimes all mouth. He said this. I heard this. One of the great things about being in a recovering drug addict and alcoholic is that it means that you are never able to lose yourself in your culturally allotted position. For example, because I became a celebrity because of being in films. But if you continue to be a 12-step person, you'll regularly attend meetings wherever you go, and this will mean that you will encounter people that are from the world perhaps that you came from, or from wherever, informed of course by the culture and geography of the region that you find yourself in. So I hear the ordinary wisdom continually, and I'm reminded that there's more interesting stuff in this world than what I think about and what I worry about, and that I can get pretty lost in here and still be pretty self-centered man. And someone said the other day, it was a really good use of something that's on the borderline of being a cliche, but if you stay with it, he says something pretty interesting. He said that thing about how when a kid opens a present, it might as well play with the wrapping as well as the present. He then talked about that this suggests that it is the subjective rather than objective reality that determines the experience that you're having, i.e., I spoke to Gabor Mate recently, and he said, I know what it's like. You attach to a person and the stars seem brighter and the moon is beckoning, but it's all in you. It's all in you. Yeah. And this, alongside this thing about the kid and the wrapping paper and the guy that I spoke to there, made me feel like, like Michael Singer continually says, why are you shutting yourself off from the bliss? Why are you shutting yourself off from the joy? Why would you go, I'm angry now? Don't do it. Don't do it. This is why you have to live the spiritual life. This is why you have no choice. The problem we have these days, I was talking to Deepak Chopra yesterday, was that it's being sold, let's face it, to us as sundry, as supplementary. But my friend Fern Cotton, who you should talk to one day, she's very brilliant.
I love her, actually.
A bunch of stuff. Yeah, she's fantastic. She said it's not a side dish, it's the main course. It's the main course. Yeah. That's the reality. The primary reality is the spiritual reality, your subjective experience. What is it to be you? To feel your body, to feel your anxiety in your body, to observe your thoughts, to observe your wants. What is this experience of being you? This is the opposite of materialism. Of course, in the material world, it's easy to say, yeah, but if you don't have a nice house, and if you don't have access to mates, and if you don't have access to resources, you will suffer. But all of us know now, don't we, that we've been around the billionaires and the powerful. Well, I suppose not everyone's been around them, but I have, and it's not worked out. Like, I know what it's like now. Yeah. And we know see someone like Amma. She's just gone, I'm only this now. I'm only this now. She's only that. She's just doing that. It seems so trivial, so trite to just embrace and hug your way through life. But somehow she's become the Oprah Winfrey of that and generated schools and hospitals out of it. Yeah. And then, that there's that priest class around her because she's from a fishing village. She's a low caste, dark-skinned Southern Indian woman. I don't know about Indian caste system, but it seems that that's not top drawer over in their deal. And but the priests that hang around her, like Shubhamarita, this guy, they're like Brahmin. And they, when she was 17, she went all wacky, started cuddling everyone and not being proper. And some people were like, get her out of here, she's nuts. And then the priest folk came and went, oh, no, she's a reincarnation of the Kali spirit. And then they set up a whole cult around her. I don't know if that's the right word, or certainly not the word they'd perhaps prefer, but an ashram anyway. And the upshot of it is by their fruits shall we know them. Millions of people have been helped after those terrible floods and the tsunami of 20 years ago, whenever that was. Hospitals were built, schools were built, women are being helped, people are being re-educated, all sorts of stuff's occurring around her. Is it effective? These are, I suppose, are the two questions. One is, how do you feel? Do you feel all right? And two, is there a practice? Are people being helped? Or is it just a subset of individualism and selfishness? I'm quite capable, obviously, of lapsing into a spirituality that's just about, I feel all right. Well, if that's what it's about, you might as well smoke crack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, spiritualism as a commodity or spiritual materialism, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and as a salve. And it's not,
or you can buy it.
Yeah, you can buy it and you use it for yourself the same way you would use any commodity. Right. And when our man JC, the great one, Jesus Christ, where it's feed and clothe the poor, be among poor people, and I do things like that sometimes, usually when desperate, and it never fails to lift me up. It never fails to lift me up. I forget myself. I remember who I am. I forget myself and I remember who I am.
I forget myself and I remember who I am. It's beautiful. Exactly. That is it, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
I don't do it very much, though, because I'm usually sort of thinking of whether or not my eyebrows look all right.
Well, we all are, right? It's
hard.
Hard.
Okay, these guys, the eyebrows. Do you think
Your
it's
eyebrows
okay if I
look
drink
good.
this?
They look good.
Thank you. My daughter, I have two daughters. My younger daughter, her eyebrows are the exact same shape of mine. So I look at her face and I wonder and marvel at the genetics. To see my own eyebrows looking back at me.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Of course, the eyebrows aren't looking because there's no optic nerve there, but they are framing the thing that's looking back at me. And the other daughter, it's less genetically obvious, but there is something else. There is something else. I'm not being so vain as to suggest that the inhered within them is something that is uniquely mine. Far from it, in fact. That the universal is present. The universal is present. Some remembering of them. What about that bit in the Vedas that sort of says, again this way, as if it's some limitless... If spatial and temporal reality are constructs based on our understanding of reality, which is based on, to a degree, sort of... all right, post-Newtonian physics and now to a degree quantum physics, where, by the way, all this stuff starts to untangle and entangle in ways that are baffling.
Very funny, yes.
Yes, if we are outside of space and time, we live this endlessly. And perhaps there is some literal familiarity in like feeling the presence of your daughter. You think, I've known you a long, long time.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Because in some ways we absolutely have, if you are going to go down that trajectory. You know, I actually wrote this. I have this cute,
You've done proper questions.
Well,
some are highlighted, some are amended.
What you just said is kind of is a quotation here I wrote on this note that I just have to read because I think it's really cool. It's from Hindu Shaivism and looking at this concept phenomenon of Shakti. So what you just said, think about this. Like Visgara Shakti is an ever-functioning, undeniable urge in the direction of expansion, of infinity, of freedom, of bliss, present at the center of the yoga body, present in the heart, continuously expanding from within and with the beating and the movement of the heart.
That's pretty good.
Isn't that good?
Yeah, I'd like that.
That's kind of what you just said.
This one here says Chit Shakti, conscious energy. Be aware, direct the energy. That thing there about ever expanding bliss.
Yes.
Coming from the heart. I like that. And freedom.
And freedom. It's about freedom.
Freedom. Be who you are. You are. And this is where inevitably, necessarily, how could it be otherwise, spirituality has to become politicized. It has to become about the maneuvering of power. Now, sometimes
it can't be separate. It's impossible to be. It's like nothing is really separate, right? It is all this interconnected web, and then you be who you are is also this way of being interconnected and expansive, right?
Yeah, it's convenient for it to be separated because, of course, any empirical encounter with spirit will inform you that there is a deep moral duty that would profoundly affect the ability of elite establishment machinery to function. Once you encounter that, you have to change everything. You have to implement the principles implied by a unitary experience, by the shared right that we have to access to this bliss. The removal of secondary ideologies mapped onto this potential perfection, even though, of course, I suppose those people that I encounter at the esoteric end, the upper echelons of all this, they seem to sort of have a adjacent to nihilistic approach, like this is it, this is the way it's unfolding. It doesn't need you to interfere. It doesn't need you prodding about in political systems. It doesn't require it. Like, maybe you meet, I don't know, who have I met that I felt like that? Many people, they seem to have a kind of an acceptance that we're not, like, this is unfolding, that God is beyond all of that God don't require you to do. But then when I think of Gandhi or Malcolm X, they got stuck right in.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you saying that there's a way that we can have hope?
I must tell you, in spite of everything, in spite of my ongoing personal failings, and sometimes in spite of my inability to run my own life or even get a pair of socks on correctly, I somehow I have this uninterrupted faith that there is going to be a profound transformation in our terrestrial consciousness that will bring about a different way of living that will be better for the for all people, not even the majority, for all people. But
I love hearing you say that.
I've been wrong before.
Knock on wood, you're not. No, I love
Yes.
hearing you say that, and I feel like you and Rick Rubin were talking about that a little bit. I've heard you talk about that with Vandana Shiva to a certain extent, in different ways of saying this, and then how you also just said when you were talking with Vern Cotton that spirituality, it's the main course, and if my little sticky note is accurate with the Shaivist, that we can't stop this. We can't stop the heart or the spirituality or this, phenomenon that infuses us that we have access to, that's love or this bliss. Even when, things are like kind of horrific and devastating, when you look at some of these things, some of the things that you talk about, on your podcast, even sometimes I'm like, oh my God. And you do it with aplomb and humor and thank you, because it makes it digestible. But even within all of that there is this current, that there is this capacity for transformation. You've experienced it, right? I mean, you're in your own life through, going into 12-step or whatever it might be for a person. These transformative shamanistic dives and resurrections that I do feel and hope that there is this possibility and potential.
I like how Terence McKenna talks about God, and obviously with him it's always, not always, but seems to be often via the psychedelic and shamanic experience with which he was so well versed. When Terence McKenna says of orthodoxy, of the paraphernalia around conventional religion, this force, which I think you described there in the Shakti note you bought, it appears through many centralized faiths that it needs to be approached kind of gingerly and superstitiously, and that you have to do things in the right order, and it's full of protocols. But he says this is like God. This potent, powerful force that's just going to deliver. This is an incontrovertible telos, this solar force, this cosmic power. I am encouraged by that, although I suppose within it is the idea that perhaps our human aims and ends are of little significance. And I suppose that's perhaps why we have to get ourselves in line somehow with the eternal when I'm caught up in the momentary, by which I mean my temporal goals. I'm not saying that we don't want to be here in the absolute present right now, but that there is an eternity that is beyond my wants and my fears that I have to have some kind of relationship with. And it seems to me, at least, that relationship requires some cultivation. And I think all the time, I don't know about you, Liz, about the psychedelic experience, the shamanic experience, about how, as a person in 20 years now in recovery, that I have a hankering and an intrigue for those kind of methods. But I also recognize that for someone like me, I perhaps have to be cautious. And I've spoken to some pretty great people and some pretty experienced people in those fields. What about you? Are you interested in that?
It's such an interesting question and phenomenon, the whole psychedelic aspect. I mean, I don't have a ton of experience with drugs per se, right? I'm kind of, I've always been like too neurotic and afraid of like, oh my God, what is it? Paranoid about what it would do to me. Having said that, what's happening now with this whole microdosing phenomenon and psychedelics and MDMA for trauma, because of where we are with trauma and how there's such a profound need to help people through that process, aspects of present company included. It's like, I think it's a good thing. I think it's been really helpful for people, as long as my only concern is that it doesn't become like, that's the only way, or it's a panacea, or it's a quick fix, that it doesn't become like, take a drug and you're done. Because the whole point of it, right, is to help use something like psilocybin as a conduit to get something awakened within inside of you that's more sustaining and full. You're the full truth of who you are in that way, and feeling connected to something greater. I think that it's also possible for us to do that through techniques of meditation, some aspects of yoga, honestly, through even the 12-step community. One of the the three jewels of Buddhism is, the Buddha, the teachings, right? And the Sangha, the community. And it's like the community is on parallel with teachings and Buddha. I mean, it is really powerful. It's got a transcendent vibe to it when you're really feeling connected to people and can feel connected to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. You're right about that. That's twice today now.
Oh,
Sangha and community and team and family. And, if you can have a tendency to get a bit self-obsessed, it's good to remember that. It's good to remember that you don't have to do everything. It's good to remember that you're not alone. It's good to remember that it's not all about me. It's nice, isn't it? It's sort of reassuring.
It's really reassuring. It's really reassuring. So I hope that answers that kind of question, because it's like
you're worried about it being commodified or sort of somehow becoming reduced, and how can it not? In a sense, that's I suppose what esotericism is about. The protection, the sacred cults, secrets. This information is not for everybody. There are perhaps then, even if there is a ubiquity behind apparent separateness, it seems there are staves and hierarchies. I'm not suggesting inferiority, although gosh, is it difficult to talk about hierarchies without talking about layers or levels and power dynamics. But at the level of the individual, I don't think anyone's advocating for sameness. I think people are advocating rather broadly for diversity. Absolutely. And I suppose that in so much that I find it easy to understand, sadly, as I perhaps have said to you, because I know I think it frequently, that when I think of a disco ball, a glitter ball or a mirror ball, is that the best way to say it? Of the words disco ball, glitter ball, mirror ball because of that Arctic Monkey song, maybe mirror ball will land on as the sort of better one. That the light hits the mirror ball and the light shines off in all sorts of different directions, but the source is the same, whatever the refractory material device is that brings things into material through the process of evolution, that is the same thing, but the little bits of light, they are all projected differently. So maybe that.
That's great. I love that. It's perfect.
And Joseph Campbell with his thing of, if the janitor is looking after a municipal building and one of the light bulbs dies, the janitor doesn't go, oh no, that's my favourite light bulb. He just puts another light bulb in. It's all coming from the same source. It's all cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that a lot.
Light. It does appear to crop up universally and archetypally throughout most of the great faiths and scriptures. This is the analogy that seems most useful. Absolutely. The idea of the light of consciousness, that it's kind of like light, that it's not an inadvertent byproduct of biological processes. It's somehow beyond them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. There is that whole talk about the light and the light body, the transformation or the movement of the body into light as it comes in and out of existence. Sorry if that sounds a little bit out there.
No, it don't. Do you want to check all of your notes, make sure you're asking me the questions that you want to? We ain't in a rush, but I just want to make sure that you don't feel like you've come out of here and that you've not been, as I heard Greta Gerwig once say on the telly, I was watching something on the telly, even though I've met Greta Gerwig and I really think she's pretty incredible. I heard her say, stay true to the person that came up with the idea. Like, I think in regard to her work as a filmmaker and often directing scripts that she herself has written.
Nice.
You've written these questions. Do you still care about them?
Well, we talked about
or
community.
Have you gone off them? Do you want to come to community and do your thing there?
Is it here?
It's near here. Wonderstruck. You want to do your thing Wonderstruck at community.
Hell yeah.
It's between the 14th and 16th of July.
I'd love to. I love it.
Talk to Nick before you go. You could curate some stuff there if you would like to. You're such a entrepreneurial person.
It's fantastic. Do I have to be in an ice bathtub to do it? Yes.
There are initiation processes, but they are conducted fairly and justly and consensually.
Fantastic. I would do it at community. I think I would do it. But now that's someone's recording that. I would have to do that. So I asked you about community, which is, and I'm glad you brought that up, and thank you for the invitation.
Come.
And I've asked you a little bit about God. I have to repeat this to you because you said it, and I think it's beautiful. you have said, it's like, what we have a little bit talked about, what is your experience, your sense of God, but you said God is an underlying oneness from which all phenomena emanate, and that all reality is a kind of symphony emerging from an instrument of God, which I guess is like the mirror ball.
See? I'm consistent. I've not changed my mind. Oh, God's a bunch of separate things. No.
So I just love that. I think that's so beautiful. All right, so I asked you
that
about
metaphor comes up a lot, isn't it? I guess the flute of Krishna is that. The flute of Krishna, he is playing that. He's playing reality into being.
Yes. And it's, kind of circling it back almost to that embodiment aspect, or the subtle body and the yoga body and some of these things that we talk about, is, the music, the vibration of music and the sound bowls and all these things that can get you into that experience of the profound or of the transcendent in a way, with a big T or a little t. Just you feeling moved, right? And I think about that, like, you're kind of both. You're an intellectual, but you do all of these, you do the breathwork practices, which, I was thinking like that gets you into your body, right? That's an embodiment practice. And I was thinking about these things of like the spiritual perspective of the subtle body or embodiment versus the psychological one, and excuse me, how they overlap.
You should do Biet. Biet.
Yes,
do you know Biet Simkin?
You showed me. You showed me at the symposium.
Yeah, I did it.
You did it.
I think I told her. I always tell her when I've done it because I feel she maybe is protective of it, and quite rightly. She does this wonderful breath technique, and she's a friend of mine, and she comes to community, so you'll meet her there. This is a good way of recognizing that the body is the root to the transcendent, and that dude Sukhi Rinpoche as well. Also, thank you. Said grounded in body, open of heart, clear of mind. And it's interesting to hear, because sometimes you feel like people that meditate the whole time feel like they're maybe not going to be focused on their bodies enough, but grounded in the body. Otherwise, you'll try to get into your body with sugar or sex or pornography or self-harm, maybe even. I don't know, like if you don't have a clear relationship with the body. I wonder what they're an expression of, all of these addictions. I wonder what the eating disorders are an expression of. I wonder how they come through the culture. What is the purity behind it? What is the pure thing? It's a very, very complicated thing. I've tried to understand it and I don't.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot to understand. And I can't necessarily tell you answers, but I can tell you my associations when you're saying all that. I mean, I think of being grounded in the body to transcend. I think of like the root chakra has to be awake to get to the third eye. I think of the tree of life having roots in order to grow, to hit, to get to its expansiveness. And when you talk of eating disorders, I think of, almost like, it's probably a bit crass, but like, why wouldn't you have an eating disorder if you have to take in some of the bullshit of the culture? You want to expel it. You're trying to get something out. Or it can also be very self-annihilating too, like destructive of the self and then purification. Certain aspects of that.
It's good, but it doesn't seem to be able to be unraveled therapeutically, at least sort of through...
Not through here.
No.
Yeah, you have to get into the body. I mean, meditation with the yogic types of meditation, the physical, doing something physical is really helpful, I think, in that way.
Maybe all of us want a quick fix a bit because we recognize how adjacent we are to perfection. Maybe all of us feel like, oh God, it shouldn't be so hard. Does it have to be so arduous? Am I going to have to go to some gym? Am I going to have to slog along some cold, lonely road at 5 a.m. watching my breath fog in front of my face just to be able to live another day when I know that God is somehow within me and around me and is all encompassing and everywhere? Why is it so difficult? Why can't it be easy? Why can't I buy it like a drug? Why can't I acquire it with charm somehow?
Because it wouldn't be meaningful, you know that.
Oh, right, yeah, you've got to have these contrasts. We've got to have these contrasts. Must we suffer? Is there an intrinsic relationship between passion and suffering? As I was informed just today, there is linguistically, semantically, that the etymology of the word passion, patio, I think he said, means to suffer. The passion of the Christ, that wasn't Christ boogieing on down and getting on it. That was our Lord being slashed up and lashed up and knowing what it is to have a body on his way to the transcendence, the ascendance, and to the rebirth. yes, I suppose you're right that there is something of a binary relationship between light and dark and suffering and passion, and perhaps that dualism is also false, because perhaps from another perspective that would look like absolute unity outside the spatial and temporal dimension. Why would you even look at the chronology of passion into suffering, of attachment into loss? I suppose that's what I meant earlier when I said access to the eternal. If you maintain access to the eternal, then I'll be able to withstand disappointment. I'll be able to withstand attack. I'll be able to withstand falling in love and heartbreak and my children growing up and yet more kittens. I see now why they are a litter, because they are spilled and strewn about my house in packs of 5 every couple of months. Another little allotment of those little guys, dishing them out on the streets. I am now.
Can I take one home?
Do you want one?
I do.
The current batch ain't ready. They need another few weeks.
Oh, really?
Where are you going back to? The United States of America?
Yeah. You want a New York cat?
Yeah. You live in Manhattan, do you?
Brooklyn.
Is it safe to go out and about?
We have a backyard, but yeah.
Does it back onto other people's backyards?
Yeah, but they can't get out of our backyard because we have 2 cats already. So the cat would be,
part of that.
It'd be part of that.
We've got 5 currently, and I'll send you some pictures, and you can make a choice, and we'll fling it across the Atlantic.
My kids would love to have another cat. My husband would be anticipatory and unsettled, but that's okay.
He's persuadable, though, your husband.
He's persuadable, yeah.
Because I felt when I met your husband, although he's evidently a person that has achieved much, he was up for doing some breath work, and in fact yielded his consciousness. He went unconscious. He passed out.
Yeah, he embraced it wholeheartedly.
He went for it. Takes a lot.
But going back to that thing you said about
cats.
No, not the cats and the eternal. The access to the eternal. In that way, then you can tolerate the intensity of the pain and suffering, right? I mean, that, I think, at the end of the day, is what gets me through, or gets people through. It's like, if I can feel that I can connect to that, and I'm kind of feeling devastated, or I'm crying, or I'm feeling so alone, if I can connect to that, I can get through it without, the quick escape, or I don't have to leave my body, split it off psychologically, get drunk or whatever it is and leave in order to survive it. I can actually be present because I'm connected to this, even though it's really difficult.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I mean, I suppose I have no choice, but at the moment what it's been about is, where is it in your body? Before you, like when my wife had our first child, she educated herself in they call it hypnobirthing,
Yeah.
And one of the things that I liked, because you do the process together, of course, was when they looked at the language around birth and the literal process of birth, and they said, like, you might want to consider the language you use to describe, like use words like she's like words like heat and expanding, and like made me realize that when I, even at the beginning of our conversation when we talked about anxiety, what do you mean anxiety? What do you mean? Where is it? Like, is it just, it's just an awareness, really? It's just an awareness in my stomach, or it's just a feeling when I feel like I might cry or whatever. It's just a feeling of heaviness behind my eyes. Like, and now if I can not attach a narrative to the bodily sensation or direct an outcome, if I can just feel it, what happens? I mean, it sort of will go. And that's what like the Eckhart Tolle and the Michael Singer and all those sort of bodywork sort of modern day teachers on this subject talk about, is that it's Michael Singer, he said, the reason you feel like that is you hold on to it. All of the pain you've ever felt is still in there. Let it go. Like, and every time you start to feel like sad, as you might call it, or fearful or angry, immediately become present and feel where it is in your body and allow it to come through you. It will come out of you. It will come out of you. Be present. And he was finding a kind of bliss in it, by my reckoning, saying, wow, I'm alive on a planet and I'm sad.
That's cool. I kind of love that.
He's incredible. I'm going to go see him, I think. He's one of the people I think I could drag some more out of.
Absolutely. Please do. I would love to listen to it. I mean, it's also reminds me of what I think you had said about Deepak Chopra. I think it was in your Instagram or something, where you quoted him as saying, like, are you going to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future? And it's like the only way to be a pioneer of the future is to be present, And if you're present, you can let go of that past bullshit. I mean, instead of walking around like projecting, am I talking to you or am I talking to my history? I don't want to talk to my history. I've already been there. Yeah,
I do it a lot still, I think.
Well, we do.
I guess I'm going to have to really dedicate myself to this a little bit harder. We have no choice. I heard only the really sick people become saints. Like, you have to be driven to it by absolute madness. Otherwise, why else would you bother? Why would you give up yourself unless it was just unbearable in there?
Absolutely.
Apparently, St. Augustine was a lunatic. And St.
They
Francis.
all were.
Augustine, it sounds like he was well into in his case, I believe, females. And St. Francis, my understanding is, even after the process of sainthood had been achieved, would have been a bit annoying, I think, bringing animals in the house, not wearing shoes and socks when the weather was inclement.
Yes.
St. Francis. And also, I feel like he was a warlord.
Yes.
Chopping people's heads off on mad principality campaigns across what is now Italy.
That's the thing, right? We can't escape our humanity, even if if they, not we, but if a person is a saint, you can't escape it. And I think that's why you were saying Michael Singer is saying that. I'm feeling sad and crazy, and okay, by myself saying it, I'm slightly giving space and distancing myself, and therefore I can celebrate being alive. And that's part of the repertoire of human experience, all of those emotions and phenomenon. I mean, I cannot act on some of the more kind of devastating or destructive ones, but I'm going to feel them and not run away from it. I don't know exactly what he's saying, but that's my association to what he's saying.
Yeah, I think don't act any of it. He's saying that you can live your life in sort of bliss. It's available to you.
It's available to you. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing was when you were saying the thing about all the saints, all of them a lot of them were very reluctant.
Were they? They didn't fancy it.
Yeah. And like it's like that kind of archetype of the reluctant prophet, right? Like, Moses did not want to go up the mountain and see a burning bush. It was terrifying,
I get the idea he was a bit shy.
Yeah.
Or maybe he had a stammer or something. And his brother did the upfront stuff. Aaron was the more chatty.
Is that, maybe.
That's what I've picked up from the Bible.
From the Bible?
Yeah, as best I can. I go to the source, but I also read other things as well. I suppose so. When people are not reluctant saints, I fancy they could be annoying.
They could be narcissists, right? It's like,
I'd say so.
Saint, yes.
I'm very saintly.
Yes.
Do you need any advice? No, thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, back off. Yeah, I suppose so. And even our Lord, take this cup away from me at the last minute. Not now, mate. You've done the hard bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. It's true. It's true. It's like, and then, like the Dalai Lama too. It's like, I'm just a monk. Like, I'm just like you.
I can't conceive of what that man's inner life must be like, given that hasn't he only ever known monkhood? Hasn't he been just like a little boy, then a monk, then meditating 8 hours a day always? It must be glorious in there. Right?
Well, can you imagine? I heard him speak once in New York City, and it was really powerful. I mean, it was on a teaching, and it was pretty like intense and intellectual. Some of it I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. But it was like kind of watching him and kind of connecting to him. And at one point he's like teaching, and all of a sudden he starts crying. And I was like, oh, I didn't know, it sounds naive, but I didn't know the Dalai Lama would cry. And he was crying, and he's like, okay. I'm sorry. He's like, it's just sometimes when I'm caught up in the teaching, and then I think of like the suffering in the world, and then I think of the beauty, and I just start crying. So, okay, and now I will move on to the next lesson. And that was probably the most meaningful thing that I experienced with him. It wasn't so much the teaching, it was the being, the person.
It's always beautiful when someone does that, isn't it? It's always beautiful to the moment where someone comes to the edge of tears, because I think this is often where, unless it's some sort of hysterical, lachrymose, self-indulgent fit, that's where we are able to touch eternity with them. It happens a lot in the 12-step context, and the room goes silent, and people feel it and accept it and recognize that this is part of it. This is part of what it is to be a human being. It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful to have that, and actually encouraging to know that the Dalai Lama, it's a pretty hard path. If even the Dalai Lama occasionally kills mosquitoes, if the Dalai Lama says there are wise selfish people and stupid selfish people, stupid selfish people think of themselves, wise selfish people think of others, then it's in a sense a pretty simple dilemma that we have here. And I suppose the things I hanker after are resolution, ecstasy, and I do know that what I'm supposed to do is absolutely let go, not try to be in control at all. There is agency, but I am operating on behalf of not this thing, not this conglomeration. No, I'm operating, I will feel it. If the answers will come, if my own house is in order, if I'm doing the basic things, if I'm treating my wife correctly, if I'm treating my children correctly, if I'm behaving correctly at work, doing this interview correctly, drive home correctly, just do these things, the world peace will take care of itself, you know. And I like it so sometimes I think greatness may be averted because I'm too often lost in triviality and snared in the quotidian, that Stanley Kubrick wrote a 17-page letter about how to take care of his cats when he's on holiday, about don't pick that one up if that one comes in the room, and make sure that you feed that one first. And that Gandhi, even when negotiating the end of British rule of India, still found time to weave and sew and look after goats. But it's not the sort of abstract, grandiose version of ideology and philosophy has a certain amount of value, but actually life is lived here. It's lived here in the present, in the relationship with the person or activity that you are currently engaged in. Where else would God be?
Yeah, I mean, it's beautifully said, and it makes me think of like that way in which, anything and everything can be a form of meditation or a spiritual practice, whether it's feeding your goat or...
What is genius? You watch them, like you see Maradona, like there's nothing else. That's all he is. There's nothing else. That's how he can do it. To him, it's easy. To Lionel Messi, it's easy. There's nothing else. Like they are living that thing absolutely, because there isn't anything else. There isn't any compromise. There isn't any contradiction or secondary agenda. Just the flow.
Yes.
Just the absolute flow. Jimi Hendrix. We know it when we see it.
Yes.
We know it when we see it. That is God. That is what we recognize in them. And the culture has created its new pantheon, but as post-enlightenment individualism, the rights of man, humanitarianism, or some pretty bloody glorious and incredible ideas that ended the medieval era, but also perhaps meant that we did not access with such ease the grace, and where that grace is truly coming from, and that not everything is commodity, not everything has got a price tag on it, not everything is just some flash and then gone.
Can't sell grace, you can't put a price tag on it. And as you said, it's that experience. And when you started what you were just talking about, you were talking about being in the rooms and almost like just that, it's like a sublime experience. You feel the sublime, and it makes me like, have there been those kinds of where you feel, I know you said you see it, when you see it, you recognize it. And when have you felt it? Like, have there been like transformational moments in your life in that way where it's like, I'm in that flow, I feel that, this is the presence of something, I don't even know how to call it.
I'm lucky that I get granted pretty good access via the chaos. I get it. And I'm lucky that I live my dharma, and that I do what I do for my life. My livelihood is, even though I do get paid for it, it's I do it all the time anyway. I don't ever stop doing it. It's what I've always done. It's what I've done since I knew it existed, and I've not stopped from the first moment that I knew it was possible to this moment right now.
Awesome.
It's not ever ended. And then more socially, I one time went Skid Row in LA. My wife was doing like a class with children there, doing craft stuff with them. So I was there accompanying her. So I wasn't like, I turned down the razzmatazz. I was a little bit around the back, just administering the ingredients for Play-Doh to these children. But once the stuff had been done, the work, you know, I fucking let myself off the hook a bit and turned up the revs and played with those children there in Skid Row. They don't know that they're destitute and homeless and poor. They don't know. But we know what's gone on there and how they're there and why they're there. And there was a bit where, you know, we play like you're a monster with kids and then you tumble onto the floor. And there was one bit where my whole field of vision was just these children's faces as they sort of piled on top of me. And when that happened, all I could see was their faces and their laughing, smiling faces. And there was nothing but between me and God in that for that little moment. It's happened other times. It will happen continually if you, I reckon, if I forget myself.
Do you experience it in the comedy when you're doing comedy?
Yes.
Do you just get sort of lost in that moment in what you're doing? Not lost in a bad way, lost in a good way.
That's where it's most reliably found.
I love it.
With a live audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for there. We go in there and you recognise that there is a third thing. There is the generation of the material, like I'm trying to tell them things that I think are funny and I'm always alluding to some idea, I suppose. And then they are receiving it and I have to overcome feelings of anxiety, which always means that I think there's something to get or something to lose. And then like after a moment, there is no separateness and then I'm in it.
Ooh, I love it.
You only know afterwards, of course. But like, that's, I suppose... There is an argument, of course, that addiction is a sacred disease. It is a craving for the sacrosanct, that you cannot live without God. You absolutely cannot live without God. And you live in a culture that doesn't offer you God because it can't offer you God anymore because it's trying to replace God with commodity or systems of material and exchange. So it can't just... talking about some mendacious globalist conspiracy. I'm talking about unconsciousness. They know not what they do. They know not what they do. Exactly. But they fucking well act like they do know what they do, which is annoying.
Right.
Actually.
It's very annoying. And it is very unconscious. And, you know, as you know, we were talking about John Vervaeke, the professor, it's like the epidemic of bullshit, you know, and then it's just like, what are we doing? And that God or grace or spirituality or sublime, I mean, it's right in front of us. Like you were just saying, it's like suddenly it's here. I'm in a comedy routine and it's just like, whew, and I'm connected. And yet it's like, it's right. So it's here, but we've kind of like just pretend it doesn't exist or it's not in the general consciousness. It's unconscious. Why are we not awake to it more and more? And I think that's why I love a lot of what you're doing, because you're saying like, hey, you know, wake up, you know, shine the light on this. Let's talk about this. Don't you see what's happening? Whether it's sometimes a political thing and oftentimes it's spiritual thing. You know, like what are we doing? And you even, when you were talking to Eckhart Tolle, it made me laugh because it's like Eckhart Tolle, right? I mean, he is a very sublime dude, right? And all of a sudden you somehow got him to say like, yeah, you know, people are just being stupid. I couldn't believe he said that. He's like, they're being stupid. You know, even he is like, what is going on?
Yeah.
You know, what are we doing? It could be so much better for us. We don't have to buy anything. It's right here.
Yes. It's all that there is. There isn't anything else.
Yeah.
But it's still, you know, we're in a very interesting moment.
We really are. You know, this concept of the Shakespearean fool, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I think of like, you know, it's the person that's telling these wonderfully funny things. It's like you have the access to power, right? To be able to tell them the truth through comedy. And I was thinking about you, and I was thinking about the Shakespearean fool concept, and I was thinking about like the fool is also the prophet, the one that can tell the truth and not get their head chopped off. So anyway, I was wondering about, is it on?
This is by Wilde. If you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. Otherwise, they'll kill you.
That's exactly it. I love it. So yeah, that was all right. Well, that's
Oscar
it.
Wilde. Read Oscar. I read. You can't put him down.
He's so funny and great. I love him. The Importance of Being Earnest.
Well, you should read The Soul of Man Under Socialism, which I'm going to read today.
Okay.
You should read The Selfish Giant and rip your own heart out, and The Nightingale and the Thorn. His children's stories, as it was Will Self who I heard say this, but I thought it myself. I don't know, I thought like I felt it before. His children's stories is where his real genius is. I mean, his genius is him, of course, Oscar Wilde. But like his children's stories, read The Selfish Giant and The Nightingale and the Rose, and like it's like devastating to read. Like these are the things he wrote for children, particularly when you think of this glib, brilliant, flamboyant man slipping off out of the house, leaving his wife and his sons at home, and going to get his freak on, being the man that he was.
Wow.
That he comes from such a deeply religious, reverent place that even his talk about aesthetics and beauty was sometimes regarded as superficial, but he was talking about God, really.
Yeah, exactly. Beauty in that context. It's fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz.
I am so appreciative of this interview.
It's the calmest I've ever been in here. I'm always in here. I'm frantic. I'm adrenalized with doing stuff.
Adrenalized. I love it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was Russell Brand. Thank you so much, Russell. To learn more about Russell Brand's Stay Free podcast, daily video series, guided meditations, stand-up comedy dates, which will be spectacular, and information about this summer's community, please visit russellbrand.com. Please come back next time on Wonderstruck. I'll be talking with Dr. Keltner, professor of psychology at the University of California, Berkeley, faculty director of UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, and best-selling author of a stunning and important new book called Awe, The New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. For more information about Wonderstruck, our guests, and some really exciting upcoming events, check out wonderstruck.org. And please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. We truly want to hear from you along with your feedback, reviews, and ratings. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at Wonderstruck Pod. Wonderstruck is produced by Wonderstruck Productions along with teams at Bailey Newman and Freetime Media. Special thanks to Brian O'Kelly, Ileana Eleftheru, Travis Reese, Raf Cross, Phil Platt, James Carpenter, Joe Keeley, Lauren Gibbs, and N. Harrod Wood. Thank you for listening. And remember, be open to the wonder in your own life.